Uh, no. Hi.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm JD. I'm here to start a conversation. It may not be a comfortable conversation, but for some of you it may resonate. But either way, I want to get you talking. Most of you don't know me. Well, actually, I don't think any of you know me. So you might be asking yourself, who is this random person? Well, I've been doing Drupal and PHP for about 6 years. Before that, I've done some HTML since the 90s. I did some basic programming even around that time as well. Do any of you remember the show or the magazine 321 Contact? In the magazine, they used to print out some basic code that you would have to enter line by line and hope that you didn't have any typos. So that was kind of my intro to debugging and programming. It was a lot to take in for a kid, but it was fun. I also help organize mid-camp in Chicago, so I would love to see all of you there if you can make it. Also organized the Drupal Chicago meetup, and before that I was a paramedic in EMT for about 10 years. I have mental illnesses as well, and right now I want to talk with you about erasing the stigma. And mental illness in tech. I'm technical architect at Genuine. We're a full-service development agency out of Boston. Have an office in Chicago is where I work out of. If you want to tweet, I'm at JD_Dev. I'm on all the Slacks as Dorf. In case you didn't know, you're at Bad Camp, so if you want to hashtag BadCamp18 and OSMI in that. Have any of you heard of OSMI? Okay, I'll talk about them a little bit later. First off, I'm not a medical or mental health professional. I'm not here to give any medical advice. I'm someone with mental illnesses, plural, and I've experienced difficulties in the workplace and my personal life because of that. I was in denial for a very long time before that, and also, I tend to swear without thinking about it, so just a heads up. I'm a preemptive apology. So there are a couple of reasons I do this talk, and the main one is to start the conversation, because people don't want to talk about mental illness. And that's the stigma around it. I've got some resources, some statistics I'm going to share. I've got some experiences both from my personal and professional life. Like I said, I was a paramedic in EMT for about a decade. So I've seen firsthand what untreated mental illness can do, both as somebody with it and as a caregiver. Also because it represents the biggest economic burden of any health issue in the world, costing $2.5 trillion in 2010, and that number is only going up. But above all else, it needs to be talked about. Conversation needs to be started. The stigma needs to be erased, and the first step is opening up that conversation. And you're all here, and you're taking the right steps. Even if you don't have mental illnesses, it's great to at least learn a little bit about it and kind of know what's going on. But why should you care? Approximately 20% of adults in the U.S. experience mental illness in a given year. And we're going to find out later that number is quite a bit higher in the tech community. For me, it's important because I have mental illnesses, and I suffered in silence for a very, very long time. I was in denial. I was afraid that admitting I had an illness would make it real. Admitting there was something wrong with me would be, actually, that there would be something wrong with me. I was also a victim of the stigma that I'm now trying to fight, and I thought mental illness meant someone was damaged or defective, and I really didn't want to be either. It was one of those situations where you're in perfect health until a doctor tells you otherwise. You go in, you get the checkup. If you don't get a checkup, you don't get a diagnosis, and you're just fine. I was also worried that if I told people, they would treat me differently, but now I teach myself that I'm not weak, I'm sick. I'm not damaged, defective, I have a disease. Right? So, I'm going to talk a lot about myself, and I want to give you a chance to give me some information about you. So, are any of you developers, site builders, here to learn development, anything related to making sites? Right, most of you. Anybody? Project managers, account managers, owners? Okay. Anybody in HR? Good. I give HR a hard time, but I understand they have a hard job. But I do give them a hard time. Are any of you in upper management, like managers, presidents, CEOs, decision makers? Okay. All right, so got a good feel for the group. So mental illness itself, it refers to a wide range of mental health conditions. And have you ever heard of the DSM-5? It's a book that's about as tall as this podium that has different criteria for diagnosing, and if you don't meet the criteria, you don't get the diagnosis, and it changes pretty frequently. I don't remember when the last one came out. They might even be on 6 now. So let's go through a couple of them. I personally have major depression, I have anxiety, I have PTSD, and I have ADHD. So depression, marked by a depressed mood most of the day, particularly in the morning, with symptoms that are present every day for at least 2 weeks. Anxiety is characterized by feelings of worry, anxiety, or fear that are strong enough to interfere with your daily activities. PTSD is failure to recover after experiencing or witnessing a terrifying event. And ADHD is varying degrees of hyperactivity, impulsivity, and inattention that lead to difficulty just in life in general. And when I was a kid, this was kind of looked at as just being a bit odd, a bit out there, kind of spacey, or just needing to burn off some energy, or whatever excuse that it wasn't a disease, it was just meh. So for PTSD though, one analogy that a psychologist gave me, we all work with computers. It's safe to say we're at a software conference. We all work with computers. So if you think about your short-term memory and your long-term memory as the RAM versus the hard disk, the RAM is quick. It's wired straight up to the CPU. In and out, the information going back and forth. That's your short-term memory. Your hard drive, it takes a little bit longer to get. You got to cache it. You got to get back and forth, load it in. So it's stored back there, but you don't always have immediate access to it. So with PTSD, the event gets stuck in your RAM. It gets stuck in your short-term memory, and anything even remotely related to it, sight, smell, sound, can bring that back and have you relive it. And once he made that analogy, that really makes sense to me. That's okay. Now how do we move it back there? And there are various treatments for that. I don't really want to go into any of them in particular because some may work for others. So anyway, so this is all the stuff that I have. Now, what changed? Well, the first step was the hardest. I saw other people living happy lives and not going through the same things that I was. All things being equal, I was miserable compared to when other people were just And I would notice that people didn't get upset or angry about things like I would. And people weren't affected by everyday things like I was. And just one day I kind of had an epiphany that maybe everybody else wasn't the problem. Maybe it was me. If everywhere you go smells like dog crap, maybe check your own shoes. And for a lot of people, this is the hardest part, including myself. This was the hardest part. So then I did something about it. I found a therapist. I started taking medication. I'm a huge proponent of better living through chemistry. I find creative outlets. I play in 2 community bands, baritone sax. It's a lot of fun, great instrument. I'm very active in the Drupal community, like I said. Do a lot of camps, help organize mid-camp, help the meetup. And I start the conversation by doing things like this, openly talking about it, down in the Contra Lounge or wherever, just hanging out. I'm not shy about talking about it, and people don't necessarily need to know the details of the PTSD, but I'm not afraid to mention it. And if other people are uncomfortable about it, that's their problem. So, I may seem pretty even-keeled right now, or I may be fooling myself with that, but before I sought treatment, life was, in a word, difficult. I mentioned I had anxiety. I was constantly afraid of everything. Paranoid. I had a crippling fear of everyday things. And if you don't have anxiety, like an actual diagnosis of anxiety, sure, people may be anxious, but actual anxiety is basically your lizard brain kicking into high gear, giving a person the same response that they should be getting when being chased by a bear as they're walking into a supermarket or into a classroom or into something. And that happened to me many times. I went to college a little bit later after my whole paramedic thing, and there were some days when I would pull up to the school and just sit in my car no test, nothing, no presentations, nothing, really big happening, but I couldn't get myself out of there, and I would look for any excuse. Look at my shirt. Oh, there's a spot. I got something on it. I better go home. I got to change, and just find a reason to skip and make up the work later. I would also cancel plans a lot socially, and that led me feeling alone. Because I made myself alone. Because I would cancel plans. And even when I did go out, I would find a way to find the dark corner and just hide and be by myself. And part of that was with the anxiety. I would always worry that people were looking at me for any flaws, something in my beard, do I have a booger hanging out, do I got, some sauce on my shirt. One example of this for me that, looking back on it, I realized how silly it was, but does anybody here commute by train? So, okay. If you commute by train, there's a worry that, it's a great day when you can get the entire seat to yourself. If nobody sits next to you, it's great. I would get on the train pretty early in the route, so I'd always have the seat to myself for a while, and there would be a few more stops. And so if by the end of the onboarding stops, nobody was sitting next to me, at first I'd be really happy, and then, wait, why is nobody sitting next to me? What did I do? Do I look like I'm going to hurt somebody? Do I smell bad? And that would just set off my entire day. So it was a double-edged sword no matter what. And if somebody sat next to me, then, oh no, am I going to pull up a website on my phone that has some questionable content by accident and an ad pop up, and what are they going to think, even though I would probably never see this person again in my life? In addition to being afraid, and this is probably an extension of it, I was very angry, probably just lashing out because I was afraid. And anything could set me off. I had a high-stress job on the ambulance. I had untreated anxiety and untreated depression. It's not a good combination. Like many people in public service at the time, I was way, way, way too proud to admit something was wrong, because I'm not to put paramedics on the same plateau as doctors, but physician, heal thyself. You should not be sick. You should not. Nothing's ever wrong with me. I'm in perfect health. But finally, unlike way too many people in public service, I sought treatment. And I say that knowing that I could count. Well, it takes me more than one hand to count how many people I know from my previous life who actually committed suicide. On untreated depression, they were too proud to reach out for help. It's rough. I was also misunderstood. People often thought I was angry when I was terrified, so I guess that my deer in the headlights look kind of looks the same as my I'm gonna get you look, which was really never my intention. It's just, please leave me alone. I don't want any attention to me. I was at a wedding sitting at it was a great honor. A friend from preschool, he invited me to be in his wedding, and sitting at the wedding party table, I just wanted to, okay, leave me alone. All the attention on them, let's keep it that way. And after dinner was served, hey man, you kind of look like you might kill everybody in this room, which is not something that I wanted to hear when I was just hoping not to be noticed at all. But like I said, I got treatment. I'm no longer ashamed of who I am. I wanted to hide in shame before because of who I am and my conditions, but I know it's part of me. I'm not too proud to admit I need help anymore, and I'm not too proud to take help. The valleys, fortunately, aren't as deep. I still have bad days, really bad days, but they aren't as bad as they were before, and they don't last as long, and they aren't as frequent. My anxiety has gone down a lot, but it still pops up occasionally. There will be days when I just need to be alone, need to hide. But since getting on medication, I've become way more comfortable in social situations. I own a coffee shop, and I deal with a ton of people every day when I'm working, so that's something I don't think I could have done a couple years ago. I probably would have just handed it off and not been around. I'm still very introverted, so after this, I'm probably going to rest for 3 or 4 days and not human for a while. I also don't have nearly as many anxiety attacks or times when I'm unreasonably afraid of doing normal things. Again, the treatment isn't perfect, but it helps a lot, so anything better is better than where it was. I'm not afraid of losing my job because I was unable to focus. And after doing things like this and becoming involved in various communities, I've realized we're not alone. I was afraid before because of the way that people might view me, And I don't feel that way anymore because of organizations like OSMI. Now, a couple of people have walked in since I mentioned OSMI. Have either of you heard of OSMI? So it stands for Open Sourcing Mental Illness. It was started by Ed Finkler a few years ago, and basically, I mean, at a very, very high level, it's to do research and training and speaking campaigns on mental illness in the tech community. There's a couple handbooks. I'll talk about those a little bit later that they put out. It's just a great organization, 501c3 nonprofit. Highly recommend checking them out. So my talk is mental illness in tech, but why tech specifically? Before there was anecdotal evidence, word of mouth. There used to be a site called DevCrest that was kind of a forum for developers with depression, almost on a Reddit type, in the good way, Reddit type, where people could just go in and say stuff. That's been absorbed by the OSMI forums. And word of mouth, that was kind of all there was to go on. And studies have shown that there's an increased incidence of mental illness, specifically anxiety and depression in people with above average IQs. Now, I'm not here to toot our own horns, but we're developers, we work in tech. I don't think that we're in the lower IQ. I think that I don't like the term IQ because it's only one number based, but we're smart people, regardless of how you want to quantify it, if possible. And a lot of us have hyper brains, which makes us more reactive to various stimulus that can affect us. So I'm not here to be braggadocious and say, haha, I'm smart, so I wear these as a badge of honor. No, it's just the way that our community is. There's also imposter syndrome. Have you ever heard of that? Yeah, I suffer from it immensely. Basically, it's a feeling you don't deserve to be doing what you're doing. And that, again, that's a very, very high level. But what helped me with that is I'm on a front-end developer Slack, which is more of just a developer Slack. And I started a mental health channel on that. We've got 15,000 members, and almost 5 of them are active. And I started this channel, and then people just started pouring in, and I started realizing, talking with them, hey, we've all got this. Everybody has it at some point. I mean, I can't remember if it was Neil Armstrong or Buzz Aldrin, and I feel horrible about that, but whichever one it was, he said, I don't know what the big deal is, I just got in a spaceship and walked on the moon. And if he says that, it's all the way down. All right, I've got some more questions for you all, because I've been talking for a little bit. I'm short of getting up, stretching, doing exercises. Let's answer some questions. Has anybody taken a sick day? Yeah. Okay. Have you ever told somebody with glasses or contacts, try looking harder? You ever ask somebody in a wheelchair if they really need help? What about somebody with diabetes or a heart condition to stop taking their medicine? Let nature help. Yeah, they all seem kind of silly. Well, we have images like this, if you have social media at all, and this is an antidepressant, this is shit. This pops up on your Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. And my favorite, what if I told you you don't need antidepressants if you lift? You know what? If you work out, good for you. I'm glad that it works for you. It doesn't work for everybody. And all those, to me, they say the same thing. It's that you're not trying hard enough and you don't really need help. It's all in your mind. Technically it's true, but not in the way they mean it. It's something that you can snap out of. And personally, I can vouch for the effects of medication. And with that being said, everyone's different. Works for me, may not work for the next person, but I don't shame people. Hey, what are you doing lifting that up? You just need some pills, come on. That would be an entirely different field. We have our own names. If you can't read that, it says, if you can't make your own neurotransmitters, store-bought is fine. So, those questions before. Replace mental illness with, or replace every injury or illness with a mental illness, with a mental health problem. And that's kind of what we go through, and that's part of the stigma. So this, hopefully I can get it to play on here. Whoa.
Like, yeah, right, man. Oh, my head.
Please don't complain. You'll ruin the vibe.
Just...
It's like you're not even trying to walk. Have you ever tried not having diarrhea?
God, my migraine is killing me.
You take meds for that?
No, my God, dude, I cut myself and it looks really, really bad.
Some people have it way worse than you do. You gotta chill out.
So I guess you're not going out with us tonight. Again. You're such a flake.
Oh, man, I really think I sprained it this time. I gotta go see my physical therapist.
You go to therapy?
Yeah?
Whatever, weirdo.
Can you hold on one second?
Honestly, your attitude sucks.
Taking another insulin shot?
Yeah, I kinda have to.
Have you ever thought about dropping the pharmaceuticals and fighting this the natural way?
My diabetes.
Enough is enough. It's a beautiful day, man. It's time to get up.
Dude, I just got eye surgery.
Yeah, like a week ago.
Well, it still hurts.
Oh, I think your friend hurt himself.
I know.
No, he's fine.
No? Okay. So, I thought that video puts a pretty interesting perspective on things, at least for me. So, how do we erase the stigma? Well, for one, we need to be stronger than fear. The way we do that, we start the conversation, which is what we're doing today. Listen. That's a huge one. If someone trusts you enough to talk about their mental health, just listen. You don't even have to say anything back. You don't have to offer advice. Just listen. Be a venting board. Let people know that they matter. And as somebody with a disability, hearing an affirmation could do amazing things. And to go back to my ambulance days, I used to transport a lot of behavioral med patients from either emergency rooms to specialized facilities, or pick them up as an emergency when they were having a crisis. And a lot of the time, just by listening to somebody, talking to them, saying, what's wrong, what can we do, they would calm down, they would open up. And I had more than once a patient give me a hug, like at the end, which violates all the basic scene safety. But you know what? It helped them, it helped me. And don't be ashamed. If you have a mental illness, you're not damaged, you have a disease. If you don't, then try to be respectful. You can't always tell who has what. And I did this very similar talk to this about a week ago. And the woman who spoke before me was talking about her OCD and how she deals with it, and how she feels that it minifies when somebody says, oh, I'm so OCD, just when they like to be organized. The way she put it is, she feels like if she does not do this activity, she will die. It will kill her. Something bad will happen. Something horrible will happen to somebody she loves. Anything. And it's a compulsion. It's something that you actually have to do, or you won't be able to go on with yourself. People who have bad days or sad days, occasionally, you're not depressed. Get diagnosed if you feel that you are, though. I mean, if it's something you don't feel yourself pulling out of, there's a big difference. And the PTSD, the big thing right now is everybody saying triggered to everything. No, if you have PTSD, like I said, it's sight, sound, smell, any sensation that can bring you back, and that actually does trigger the event, and you relive it. So just try to be respectful of what you say or how you portray things. And if you do feel that you have mental illness, get treatment. Just see a therapist, see a doctor. If you're having a crisis, call 911. Okay, so off my soapbox, what about the workplace? My anecdotes are one thing, but how are employees and employers affected? Well, let's see what the data says. OSMI also does a survey yearly. osmihelp.org/research. 2017, we had about 800 responses. It was made available to several communities, and all of these responses are self-reported. So just some things to consider. Would you bring up a physical health issue with a potential employer at an interview? This projector isn't great, but if you can rate it, yes is 23%, no is 37, maybe 40. So, would you bring up a mental health issue with a potential employer at an interview? No, 69%. It's going back almost twice as many. Does your employer provide resources to learn more about mental health issues and how to seek help? A lot of those are called employee assistance plans, something along those. A lot of people don't know whether or not they do. 27%. It's not quite evenly distributed, but it's pretty close. Maybe, yes. Does your employer provide mental health benefits as part of healthcare coverage? Well, fortunately, the majority is 56%. Yes, has it. So I think that's pretty great. Going back to 2016, for some reason this question wasn't on 2017. Do you feel that being identified as a person with a mental health issue would hurt your career? Maybe and yes. That's really small. It's 39 to 41%. So about 80% in total is maybe or yes in the positive, and only 12% is negative. I'm sorry, 88% because there's that yes it has, the yellow pie slice up there. So only 12% is in the negative. And this is something I worry about every time I give this talk because it's recorded, and if you search my name you're probably going to find about 7 or 8 recordings of this. But it's really freeing knowing that all my cards are on the table, and if somebody is going to hire me after hearing this and they know what's happening, that really speaks volumes about the company. Do you think discussing a health issue with your employer would have negative consequences? Well, I put these side by side for comparison. Mental, pretty big chunk of that, and physical, no is 71%. So over 5 times more people think there would definitely be negative consequences. Again, this was from the 2016 survey that had 1,500 responses roughly. Now, remember when I said about 20% on average, 1 in 5 people have mental illness? In the tech community, 42% answered yes to a diagnosis. And do you think, and this is including the diagnosed, do you think you have a mental health condition? So looking at that 42, 43%, there's still another 19% who think they are but don't have the diagnosis, whether it's because they don't want to go get treatment, they don't want to get the diagnosis and have that label on them, that really don't know the answer to that. But all these charts lead me to one conclusion, and that is we're afraid to talk about mental illness in the workplace and personal lives. We don't want to bring it up, and that's because of the stigma. We're afraid that we're going to have negative consequences around us. We're going to be treated differently at work. We're going to be afraid that coworkers are going to change their opinions of us. And if you have anxiety already, wondering what people think about you is just going to make your life a living hell. And for me, not as much anymore, but it used to be everything would immediately go to the worst case scenario. So, a very binary mind. If things aren't great, then they're immediately horrible. And I had a couple incidences where I got an email that boiled down to we need to talk on like the 87th day of my 90-day probation. And it was on a Friday night. Hey, let's schedule something on Monday. So Monday would have been 90 days. And the entire weekend I'm just redoing my resume, cleaning things up, getting ready to send it out, checking Indeed. No, it was just, hey, just want to do a check-in, make sure everything's going okay. And I don't know if anybody else has had this, but my password was incorrect on my email one day, and I thought I was getting Miltoned. If you have ever seen Office Space, just they're going to let me keep doing the work until I stop. It's kind of a binary mind, like I said. It's either yes or no. We're also afraid we might get sent to the HR department. If you, how many of you know your HR department very well? Like you feel very comfortable? So a pretty minor, very, very small minority. But if you don't know your HR department, you don't really want to open up to them. if it takes you a lot of courage to speak to your direct manager or a supervisor, somebody that you talk to on a daily basis, and say, hey, I need a couple minutes, I need a half day, I need a day away just to recuperate, and this actually happened to me, and they pretty much hang up on you and say, I can't talk to you about this. I immediately got a phone call from the HR department, somebody that I hadn't talked to in 18 months since I had been hired, and they dictated my plan for the going forward. Hey, what do you need help? This is what you're going to get. And so for me, she might as well have been a stranger, because a year and a half I hadn't talked to her. So, as of 2015, 17.9% of all U.S. adults had some form of mental illness. But why should a workplace care? So I've given a lot of facts, a lot of statistics. Well, because depression alone impacts an estimated 9.5% of the American adult population, which is pretty significant. Again, in tech, I'm going to say that's a little bit higher. But altogether, it's estimated to cost 200 million lost work days each year, which can cost employers $44 billion with a B annually. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of lost time. So how can we mitigate this? How can an employer be better about, if you want to get a company to do something, tell them that it hurts their wallet. Well, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. If a workplace is prepared and educated to deal with a disability, employee may feel more comfortable being open about it if they need time off. The one that I did about a week and a half ago, it was an internal conversation, initiative, and the woman that spoke before me about the OCD, she worked for the company, and I was watching. It was a remote talk, and I was watching her on the screen. She was sitting in a conference room with everybody she works with, not like this where I don't know really any of you. And she was just opening up and saying, this is what I went through, this is all this. So that company, the people feel empowered to say, hey, I have this going on. If they're not comfortable, and I was guilty of this, I would have times where I would show up and not do anything for days. I would log in, I'd be available on Slack, but I just couldn't function because I was afraid to go to my boss. So I was putting off work and then waiting until the last minute to actually spend a late night when it was like, okay, well, I know I'm going to lose my job if I don't do this, or I think I'm going to lose my job because, like I said, if it's not great, it's horrible. I didn't want to talk to my boss because it felt like one of those older style companies where if you say you have a disability, if you say you have something wrong, then they're going to treat you differently or find a way to get rid of you. Now, I can't say this for sure, but for me personally, if I had felt comfortable saying, hey, I need a day, I need an afternoon, I just need to recuperate and step back, I could have recharged a little bit, and instead of wasting a week and a half of not working, 24 hours at most, 8 hours a shift of unbillable time versus billing for stuff that wasn't getting done. So what can we do about this to help out with OSMI? Well, for one, take the survey, osmihelp.org/research. Being completely honest, it's not a quick survey. It's about 20 minutes time investment, but it does help out immensely every answer. Outside of OSMI, we can fight ignorance with information. On that same place that they sent me to HR, I ended up quitting there. And on my exit interview, I was like, hey, so there's this organization you guys should probably check out and maybe learn a little bit about it. And I sent them a link to the OSMI handbooks, which I'll talk about in just a second here. There's also something called a mental health first aid class. Have any of you heard of that? So it's a shorter class, but it's great for HR managers, anybody who might deal with somebody who can come to you in a bad time and say, it's not to help diagnose, it's to help deal with and make sure that you're prepared to deal with when an employee walks up and says, hey, I'm not having a good day and I need to do something about it. Or anyone can take it. I highly recommend it. We can take the OSMI survey. Not gonna lie, it takes about 20 minutes, but every response helps. Then we have the OSMI handbooks, and again, I've been speaking about OSMI a lot, but they helped me get here. It was an OSMI talk that inspired me to do this talk, and if Ed hadn't done a talk in PHP Chicago, I would not be standing here right now. And it's just a great organization. But the handbooks, there are 3 of them. They're DRM free. I think it's $9.99 for the 3 of them. And it's on LeanPub, so $7.99 of that goes straight back to OSMI. And the 3 of them are Mental Health and Tech, Guidelines for Mental Wellness in the Workplace, Guidelines for Executives and HR Professionals, and Guidelines for Employees. And those are all based on the ADA, based on what's legal, what are some of the best practices, and keeping everybody in the safe zone of where they need to be. Seriously, take the survey, please. I would really appreciate it. Every response helps immensely. Now, in open source tech, conferences like this, we have a great community, and that's our greatest resource. Looking back at those charts, we had a lot of people around us. 2 out of 5. Well, 2.15 out of 5 people are dealing with mental illnesses. So that means we're not alone. And fortunately, we're more than just usernames, even though a lot of us put our usernames on our name tags. There's more to us than that. And that's something that events like this help remind us of. I mean, we're all interacting, we're all going out, having dinners, just meeting people. And it's great. So we know that we're real people. We're not ones and zeros. We're not just somebody on the issue queue nitpicking at, well, you're over 80 characters. Let's try it again. And we're not damaged. Those of us with mental illness, that's something I cannot stress enough. You're not damaged. You're not defective. You have a disease. You have a disability. And with a little work together, we can erase the stigma. So a few resources available. OSMIhelp.org. If you're looking for a therapist, 1-800-THERAPIST or psychologytoday.com has a therapist finder, both psychologists, licensed social workers who are therapists. It's just a weird title for them, but they are therapists with master's degrees, and psychiatrists. And the Suicide Lifeline there. If you are feeling suicidal or having a crisis, use that or use 911. Just definitely get help. So I want to thank you all for listening. And to help me get here, OSMI gives me quite a bit of funding and really helps out with travel costs. Also, these people donated to a GoFundMe that I put up. So if you see Avi, I think he's the only one here. They helped me cover the travel expenses, so just say thank you for me. I've thanked them a lot. And Genuine has given me time off to attend, which is more than enough from them. I mean, this isn't a tech talk, so I don't expect them to pay for it, but it's more than enough. If you're so inclined, I have a survey that a little bit of feedback. I don't like doing the joined in thing because I can't keep it all in one place. So it's bit.ly/JDF survey. And we're not quite overtime yet, but close. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, well, thank you all very much for coming. Really appreciate it.